What up, everyone? It's Press. So about 2 years ago, I put out a video. Elites' vision for a global superstate literally crumbles overnight, discussing Brexit. I stated that, well, this is the end of the EU. If it doesn't happen soon, it will happen later. And many people basically called me an idiot and said that won't ever happen or that it's planned to happen. But I actually don't think so, because if you look at what's happening in Italy right now, not only with the recent election and agreement between the Lega Party, which is the anti-establishment left wing, the anti-establishment right wing, and the Five Star Movement, which is the anti-establishment left wing, coming to an agreement to basically install a new government that would be anti-EU, anti-bureaucratic overlords, and what's going on exactly coincidentally and admittedly so in Italy as well. We have in Turin the Bilderberg group meeting, and they are discussing how to deal with this populism rising not only in Italy but across Europe. We also have in the Czech Republic populism winning an election there recently. We have in Slovenia, right-wing anti-establishment as well, protests that are Eurosceptic. That's the term that has arisen from this. Eurosceptic movements across Europe. We also have in Poland as well a lot of that going on. We even have in Sweden that going on. Oh, I really hope that happens in Sweden. I hope some sort of anti-establishment government is elected there so they can start shipping out all those migrants that have destroyed their country. That's what's going to happen in Italy. The leaders of, I think it's the Lega or the Five Star Movement, one of the leaders there that, it has a lot to do with the new power shift, basically said that, we're going to ship out 500,000 migrants. This is a very good thing for Europe. One by one, you're going to see these dominoes fall. And it's only a matter of time before the EU finally completely crumbles. And I knew that right away, right when Brexit happened. Many people were postulating that. But when I put out that video, I was basically raising a glass saying, this is the beginning of the end of the EU. The elites, the Bilderberg types, shouldn't even call them elites, the globalists, I guess you could call them, have been wanting a global superstate for a very long time, and the EU is really the beginning of that. After World War II, they created the European Partnership, and then that eventually evolved into the EU in the early 90s, and it was sort of a beta test or a microcosm that they eventually wanted to expand into a superstate, a global superstate with separate, continental superstates, EU being one of them. They wanted the North American Union. Here in the United States, thank God, I mean, we've been ahead of the curve when it comes to fighting this this global government. I think the nail's in the coffin at this point. I really do think they're failing on, the implementation of this bureaucratic world order that they wanted. Now, all of that being said, there is still a lot of fighting to do, especially on the cultural level, and there's some damage that is just almost irreversible. So I don't know really how these countries in Europe are going to ship out these migrants that George Soros groups and globalist affiliated NGOs have shipped into their countries to destroy their people and their culture. I don't really know how this is going to work out, but I hope it does. Italy will be a great example of how this may play out. Of course, every country is a little different. So they are literally panicking. This weekend at the Bilderberg Group, we have the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, King William Alexander of the Netherlands, tech billionaire Peter Thiel. A lot of big names meeting there, and that's not it. There's so many big names. The number one admitted subject on their agenda is populism in Europe. Number two is the inequality challenge. Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. And, well, I'll discuss Peter Thiel after. The future of work is number three. The future of work. I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean. Artificial intelligence. Yes, this is something that the globalists are very, very interested in. And I think they fear it as well. And, that's probably why Peter Thiel's there. Peter Thiel, I discussed this in a video about blockchain and the emergence of blockchain being used for artificial intelligence in the future. Peter Thiel is hugely into this stuff. Like, he's obsessed with creating AI, admittedly, and he's not, afraid to talk about that. That's probably why he's there at the Bilderberg conference. Peter Thiel's an interesting guy. I don't think he's 100% in bed with the globalists. Like, I don't think he wants a world government, but I also don't think he's a very good guy. I think he's a bit obsessed with the AI thing, and I think that could, I think he's a bit blind as to what his intentions are. I don't think he truly wants to help people. I think he thinks he does, though. Peter Thiel's a weird guy. I've done some research on Peter Thiel. I've seen some good and some bad from, his endeavors and his initiatives, so it's very interesting. The U.S. before midterms, that's number 5. Right, that's a huge one, because if you look at some of the numbers, and there's actually a video by Tim Pool that he put out, I'll leave a link to it, how especially millennials, a lot of people thought that the election of Trump would shift a lot of millennials to the Democrats. Millennials tend to be left-leaning, but that isn't happening since 2016, since the election of President Trump. It's actually moving in the other direction. More and more millennials and Gen Z especially are moving into conservatism, are switching to conservatism, which is really interesting. It wasn't expected that would happen. He did a really good video on this, showing all the statistics of how millennials plan to vote this coming election, and it looks like the Democrats are going to lose, for the most part, a majority of the congressional seats, or at least it's going to stay with the Republicans. Some people were saying it's going to switch to the Democrats. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So that's a good thing, I think. Obviously conservatism is more anti-globalist, and that is what countries need right now in the West, 100%. We're all on the same page when it comes to that. I'm sure it's a necessity at this time in history. Now, I will say this is worth noting. I think it's important to say that nationalism can get out of control as well. It's possible in like 25 years we'll need less of it, let's say, or maybe in 50 years. We know what happens when nationalism sort of loses its vision and becomes blinded by certain endeavors. We know what happens, but right now it's needed 100%. So we should be supporting more nationalist, anti-globalist candidates in our respective nations, definitely. So what else do we have here? Number 6, they'll be discussing free trade. Yeah, so basically, we all know free trade is actually the opposite of free trade. It just means globalist corporatism, and that being implemented supranationally in the West and across the whole world. The East too. The TPP obviously involved, Japan and stuff like that. So, number 7, U.S. world leadership. Basically, what are they going to do about Trump? 8, Russia. What are they going to do about Putin? And we already know what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that Putin and Trump are working together. And, from the beginning, right when Trump was elected, I said they're going to do everything they can to demonize him and say that he, try to impeach him and smear him and all this bullcrap. It's to be expected. So, they're obviously going to discuss more of that. 9, quantum computing. That's an interesting one. Quantum computing. See, that's not something that I've looked at in depth, but that is coming, within the next 10 years. That should be interesting. I'd like to know what exactly the topics and subtopics are surrounding that, category of discussion. 10, Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's a big one too. What's going on in Yemen right now? That's what that's all about, obviously. Okay, so number 11, the post-truth world. What are we going to do about all these anti-establishment, alternative media websites and news outlets? What are we going to do about this quote-unquote post-truth world? Alternative facts. Yes, the truth comes out. What do the liars do? They turn around and call it a post-truth world. Number 12, current events. Well, that's rather vague. Yeah, I don't know. Current events. So that's basically, it could be anything. Could be any of the previous 11 categories. So that's what Bilderberg will be discussing, of course. Like I said, number 1 is populism in Europe. As it should be. They ought to be worried. They ought to be worried. They should have been talking about this, and I'm sure they were, but this should have been their number 1 topic back when Brexit happened. Maybe it was, I don't recall. But look, they have a lot to worry about. Their EU is crumbling. Crumbling. It's the beginning of the end. It's already past the beginning of the end. It's starting to be like the middle of the end. You'll see, I think it will happen pretty quick once the next election cycle comes around and all those respective countries in the EU, you're going to see it eventually, just one by one. It's going to crumble. I'm calling it right now. So, anyway, I'll leave links to everything I discussed today. Let me know what you think about this. Just a little bit of a good news / warning as well video, because I do want to say this, and it is almost needless to say, but they're gonna have economic warfare campaigns, smear campaigns against the countries that are opting to leave the EU, that are, or at least Eurosceptic. They're gonna fearmonger. They're gonna do everything they can, and that's coming in your countries, Europe, when you decide to leave the EU. Be careful, and just know that when things start to seem like they might be falling apart even more, when you do leave the EU, it's probably the globalists playing their games, trying to make it look like that's the reason why things are falling apart, when it's really them that are causing many of your issues, the fear-mongering, the psychological warfare, the actual economic warfare that made hurt the economies there. So be ready for that. And that's all I gotta say. Let me know what you think. It's been Press. As always, keep your head up, stay real, and no fear.